now. The NHS needs an immediate cash injection of £8.5 billion a year. That is according to new research from the BMJ's Commission on the future of the health service.
Leading experts are claiming that the money, I don't know who they are, is needed to make up a £32 billion shortfall in funding in England and would help tackle problems such as high waiting lists.
Well, joining us now is former NHS doctor and broadcaster Aamer Khan. Dr Khan, what do you think the future of the NHS looks like?
Good morning. It's ever since the NHS started in 1948, there has been a struggle to keep up with its success. And, I'll qualify that because the NHS, the principle of delivery of care at the point of need is brilliant. However, as that care is delivered and the health of the nation improves and longevity increases, we're creating a bigger problem for the NHS. And now we're talking about terminal morbidities. And these are the health conditions that affect people towards the end of their lives. And it might actually affect the last 25% of their lives. That is the burden on the NHS now. It's no longer about preventing ill health. It's about managing it and struggling to manage it.
Aamer, really good to have you on, and I mean that.
Thank you.
I want to say, my father, great service on the NHS, and I think all of us would have many stories about when we need the NHS and they are there. Talk about junior doctor strikes in a minute. You started with an interesting point. The principle in 1948, I think, was a fantastic principle. Care for those who need it at the point of entry. The fact of the matter is, it's to me, and I don't quite know the best way to describe this, but the NHS is some sort of mythical thing in people's minds. We can't criticise it, we can't knock it down. Yes, it's full of amazing people. The fact is, if you look at it in a cold-hearted way, the NHS of 2024 is not fit for purpose. We have a much larger, much more ageing population, and for many people, they see money poured in and they go, what's happening? And whilst the concept's great, is it not fair to say that it needs the most radical overhaul for it to work? And that needs all parties, cross-parties, to come together and maybe look at private investment or whatever, because the concept's great, but it don't work, does it? It doesn't.
Clearly. I mean, we're so far behind on what's needed. With the waiting list, that's only part of it. With a burden of morbidity, as I said before. I think, what we need to be looking at is not just throwing money at the NHS, but how we can restructure it, how we can become more efficient, and also how we can engage other agencies like the food agencies and other organisations that have an impact on our health as we move forward. And I think the responsibility goes way beyond just the NHS for good health. It's about preventing. And one of the issues is that, we're drowning in... we look at obesity and diabetes, which is a huge problem. And this is a problem of how we live. And it's not really a problem of the NHS. It's a problem of the pre-NHS intervention, because the NHS will deal with problems of diabetes and problems of high blood pressure, problems with heart disease
behind it.
But the causes are how we're interacting with our environment and how we're being educated and supported.
Well, interesting, later on, Nick, it's been reported that billboard advertising for junk food's being banned by Sheffield City Council. Now, junk food, people will say to me, but you don't understand. Well, it's perfectly fair enough to say that if you go and buy a fast food meal and bung it in the microwave, you can cook fresh vegetables at the half of the cost. But the world's changed. Fast food, people's lives have changed. That creates obesity. We talked about smoking yesterday being banned. People were saying, I don't think you should ban that. People should make their minds up. But there are many reasons why we've got an older population, an iller population, and it's creaking, and people feel like you can't criticise the NHS. It doesn't work in many concepts.
I don't think it's about criticism. It's about understanding how it's evolved and how it can evolve in the future and what we should be doing to make those changes.
And what kind of changes would they be, Aamer? Because does it come down ultimately to more financial investment? OK, not necessarily in the NHS as it exists now, but what if we were to invest more in social care, like we're talking about preventative measures, or separate the NHS properly from the care of the elderly, which I think is such a huge... I hate using the word burden, because old people are not a burden, but they certainly use up a lot of the money within NHS services at the moment, simply because they can't be discharged back to care homes because there aren't enough doctors to discharge them.
I think there's been a whole change in the way that we live. I remember when I was growing up, there was a whole community atmosphere within the area that we lived, and everybody looked after everybody else. We had more of an extended family, and if we went into hospital, we'd be keen to get out of hospital and look after our elderly. With all the pressures of life, of having to live from day to day, going to work, I mean, even looking after your children has become very difficult. So I think, and we've got to understand that a night stay in hospital is just under £500. It would actually be cheaper to pay the families to take their relatives.
I have to say, and again, probably because it's early in the morning, I don't quite know the right way to put this. We could do with looking at other cultures and other countries about how they treat the older generation.
Oh, for sure.
I absolutely, genuinely believe that's one of the... I completely with Nicola. I was lucky I didn't work. I spent the last 2 years of my life, I was on call to my dad every single day, and I can count myself very lucky. But in other cultures and other countries...
Oh, you take in...
And I honestly have always said, we owe such a debt to the older generation because none of us will be there. But you're absolutely right, that is a drain. You don't want to say a drain, but it's a drain, right?
No, they're not a burden or a drain. It's just something that, needs specialist care that we don't provide.
So not just money for you?
I don't think it's just money. It's a whole cultural change. It's a change in our priorities. And it's no longer the burden just of the elderly. Now we're seeing obesity in children as well. And they're going to run into the problems that our elderly have in mid-age or even younger.
Terrifying.
And what we don't know is how their health is going to progress. Yes, we've extended longevity in a cohort of the population, but what we don't know is what the younger cohort is going to do, and is their life expectancy going to be even shorter?